first service will be this Wednesday, March 4th. Every Wednesday during Lent, except for Ash Wednesday, we meet at one of the local churches at noon for a spiritual service and then fellowship afterwards. I left the churches where we're going to be going up there at the table. Also, on March 15th, we're going to be back up here at the Heights. But you can come in your swimming suit. You can come in your workout gear. You can go and play some basketball. We're going to have the dedication at 3 o'clock up at the Heights for the grand reopening. So, please come. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the staff that put this together. Carmen, Pace-McFerren, McDonald, Mary Dez, Carlin Hickabeen, Teresa Thomson, Amy Hamilton, and Sandy Hart. Thank you very much for this outstanding event. Those who are going to be in the program today, thank you for giving your time and talent. We also have here from our City Council, I'd like to recognize Reggie Finney and Dan Levy, along with our fire department and police department, who are also present. I'd also thank John Gaskin, who's been helping out the city a little bit, and Wally Price from the America. Thank you for being here. In 1971, I was assigned to Soldan High School as a teacher and a coach. That was my first year of 34 years in St. Louis Public Schools. At that time, Soldan High School, Beaumont, Sumner, and Vashon were all black, non-integrated high schools in the city. In 1980, the Board of Education was to integrate Soldan High School. They took about a third of our African American students and sent them to Cleveland, Southwest, and Roosevelt, and sent a like number of white kids to Soldan High School. This is why I have this button on today, honoring what we did at Soldan High School, because we made it work. Amen. And you'll see two hands, a black hand and a white hand intertwined. About October, we had our homecoming. One of our returning young ladies was elected homecoming queen. And a young man who attended Southwest the year before was elected homecoming king. So at the homecoming dance, they had a song for the king and the queen. As they got out to dance, everybody there kind of circled around them, and then they began clapping. And that reminded me at that time, and it reminds me again today, of what Martin Luther King said when he said, I have dreamed that someday little black children and little white children will go up hand in hand to school. I'd like to bring up Mr. Derwin Johnson, our communications consultant, who is going to be our Master of Ceremonies today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Master, Mr. Mayor. I've got a little bit more to say about me before I get rolling, I'd like to start this off officially and thanking the man upstairs for whom all our blessings flow. And to do that, I'd like to introduce Pastor Robert Caruth Jr., the Church of the Living God Community Church.
Thank God for this auspicious occasion. We come together and celebrate the accomplishments of our patristic fathers, matriarchs, who have laid the foundation for where we are today. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this extra occasion to come together as brothers and sisters in a harmonious voice to acknowledge the accomplishments of African Americans in this community and what they have done, and those who work hand in hand crossing the aisle of ethnicity. Pray and bless this time. We ask these things in Yeshua's name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Reverend. Again, my name is Derwin Thomson, and I have to say, first of all, it is an honor and a pleasure to be here. On the program, it has me down as Master of Ceremonies, but I want to really straighten that out and say I'm basically one of the homeboys from Richmond Heights, Missouri. My parents, my mother's here, my father's deceased, God rest his soul, moved us here in 1961. Sorry, I don't want to age your mother. I don't want to age you, but it's been a while. And I remember growing up here, it was just a fantastic experience. Back then, though, I have to say that we didn't like it. And just a little story before I move on to our next event. Me and a friend of mine, left Richmond Heights, left St. Louis, drove across the river, and on our way to college, and we turned around and we waved at St. Louis. I was waving at Richmond Heights, thinking, I'm never, ever coming back here. But after traveling around the world, being blessed to have fantastic opportunities, I came back for a 2-week visit several years ago and decided this is the place for me, back in Richmond Heights. And one of the reasons, one of those many reasons, can be seen along the wall here. The commemoration team has done a fantastic job of chronicling some of the fantastic events and fantastic people who have made this community great, who have helped to make our country great. And now moving on, I would like to introduce Reverend Garland Williams, and we've known each other and go back from the days that we would walk home from football practice, track practice, along with his brother, my brothers and sister, and he's got a real treat for us. He's going to give us a song that was in 1999 was chosen by the National Association of Colored People as the Negro National Anthem. But that has changed over the years and is now turned into the Black National Anthem. Pastor Williams.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. There's a phenomenal thing that happened in life. You wouldn't believe it, but Derwin used to be on the offensive line blocking for my older brother, and he was real big. And I used to be a wide receiver, and I was real skinny. I can't figure out what in the world happened. Some DNA got mixed up somewhere. Listen, I'm a brother from the hood too, of Richmond Heights. And this is what Richmond Heights people do a lot. We kind of do things the way we like to do them. And this is a very lovely song, but if we sing all this song, we're going to be here till like 9 o'clock. So if you don't mind, we're going to sing the first stanza and the third stanza, and you can read the second stanza when you get home. Now, it says led by, but what you don't know is I'm the choir director and you are my choir. So y'all need to stand up, choir. Because we're getting ready to sing.
Sound loud as the rolling sea.
Sing a song.
Sing a song full of the faith that the darkness has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Praising the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
And the three, God.
God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, God who has brought us thus far on the way. God who has mine, led us into the light. Keep us forever in the path we pray.
Go real strong, real strong.
Bless our feet straight from the places our God where we met thee. Bless our hearts drunk with the wine of the world we forget thee.
Missed the cutoff. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Good. Y'all can keep y'all now. Here we go.
True to our God, true to our native land.
Good job, choir.
Thank you so much, Brother Williams. Can I do this first one?
Yes, man. Derwin.
Also, I want to introduce, and she's going to be back with us a little bit later, and this was probably my mess up, Kathy Hopson Caldwell, who will be up a little bit later. All right, okay. Okay. I know she's going to be gracing us with a performance later. I'm not sure if we're going to do anything now. No?
A little bit later.
A little bit later.
Gotta get a little cake first. Okay.
I definitely understand that. Okay, moving along. Now I'd like to introduce you to Lena Wortham. Lena's a young lady who is going to introduce us to someone who is very special to her, very special to our community, and to the world. Lena Wortham.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today's program is a celebration of Black history. More specifically, the Black history of our community, Richmond Heights, Clayton, Brentwood, Maplewood. Now, we know that for the most part, most of our families in this community are related in one way or another. I would like to introduce you to one of our leading Black family members. She has been an active member in our community, having lived in Richmond Heights for more than 50 years, as well as a memorable historian of our family. Above all, she is a monumental figure that I am so proud to call my mother. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you Miss Lena Wortham.
Thank you, Wanda. Wonderful. I expected her to say nice things about me. It says here, reflections on growing up in the community. But I'd like to add, in the community of Clayton, Missouri. I see all along the wall that you have remembrances of Richmond Heights. I grew up in Clayton, and I'd like to just share that with you. Because Clayton was once a thriving African-American neighborhood. Now it's little known history. My name is Lena Wortham, and I was born in Clayton, Missouri, where about 300 families lived. They were the residents there. And everybody knew who you were. Families lived on Cromwell, Henry Road, Bonham Avenue, Forsyth, and Brentwood Boulevard. My first years for school were spent in a one-room brick building. I'm going to show you this in a minute. This is what you feel. One-room brick building known as Attucks Elementary School, named after Christopher Attucks, and it was built in 1923 to serve African-American children who resided in the Clayton School District. Do you have that there? Please.
It's also noted over here, right under the light.
Thank
That's
you.
it right there. And the other one is right here under this one. Very clear.
It had a manual training room and a playground for inclement weather. And the game of that day was jacks. I don't know how many of you remember that. And I'm jumping here. The average attendance was about 25 students until its closure in 1954. I remember there were students attending from Maryland Heights, Kinloch, Chaminade, and Richmond Heights. We were educated in that one-room schoolhouse from grade 1 through 8. Grade 1 would be grade 1, grade 2 would be the second grade, and so forth up to the 8th grade, where I graduated in 1946 at 11 years old and went to Douglas High School in Webster Groves and graduated there at 15. The others in my 1946 graduating class went to Vashon, Sumner, or Washington Tech. Now, when you see the picture back there that was all those children with the Charlie Brown tree in the back, one of those children happened to be me. So, which one? My teacher's name was Colleen Bowden Thomas. She had beautiful dimples. Never knew if she was ever married. She wore a bob haircut, which was popular in that day. Clayton has many points of interest to me. The school, the church, the Baptist Church of Clayton, 216 South Brentwood Boulevard. You can go there now, the Broccoli House sits there. And when my father was funeralized, I'm going to stop right there and tell you something funny. My father always said that my sister and I were always late. And he said, you're going to be late for your own funeral. And so when it came time for his funeral, we had the funeral service, and when they prepared to put him in the hearse, it was on a flat tire. Let's go further. My dad worked for Almine Construction Company. And he would buy gas from a Texaco service station that used to sit where the Clayton Correctional Center sits now. Who whose owner was a short, jolly man whose name was Ted. Excuse me, his name was Mr. Ted. You see, they led one-room schoolhouse, and by the community at large, we were called manners and morals. But that's not to say that the kids were not mischievous when I was citing. I hate to admit I was one of them. Let me go back to the church over here, 216 on Woodward Boulevard. We would go every Sunday and we would look directly across the street at Shaw Park and see all the happy little white kids swimming. We would yearn to swim, but that was one of the things that we just couldn't do at that time. Across from the correctional center was a parking lot where the First National Bank of Clayton was, with its beautiful marble door, and that's where Dad did his banking. Years later, my sister and I were invited on a house tour, and while we were on the lower level of this house, and I thought I was whispering, I reached over and said to my sister, "Doesn't this marble door look like the floor that was in the First National Bank of Clayton?" And before she could answer, a gentleman leaned toward us and said, "It's the same floor." I could not believe it. So during Christmas season, that Texaco station that I spoke about earlier would serve as a wonderful place to put in an order for toys. And needless to say, my dad purchased quite an amount of toys for both me and my sister for our wide eyes on that magical Christmas morning. However, we had a black cat who loved me and I loved him, who alerted me one Christmas Eve of sound. It wasn't coming from the room, it was on the front door, and I heard Mr. Ted and Daddy bringing in all that good stuff. Needless to say, our eyes were gleaming the next morning. We lived at 7730 Bonham. Have you got that one? Where at one time it was a Holiday Inn. It might still be a Holiday Inn, but it might have its names. And this is the picture of my house. I loved that house. Has held many memories for me. Excuse me while I turn the page. But that, as I said, that space held many memories for me. I can still smell Mom's lemon meringue pie. And Dad, at Christmas time, I couldn't smell it, but I couldn't wait to taste it. He would make eggnog from scratch. It's a secret liquid recipe. You can imagine what that was. And wonderful after-school snacks. The Forest Parkway Bridge that now crosses over Henley Road used to be a railroad track. And right beside it was an alleyway, more like a street that housed the house where a craggy old man lived. He had the most wonderful green apple tree in the whole house. And when the apples were hanging on our fence, we, the mischievous kids, would take a big stick and knock them down. And the craggy old man would scream at us. And for as long as I lived in Cleveland, I never saw his face. And later, working at the county assessor's office in Clayton, I came upon pictures taken of the homes which were in those days used to assess the property. So I wanted to borrow them for eternity, but I thought better of it and left them there where they were. Years later, I went to the assessor's office and asked if, by chance, they had been preserved. I was told they had been thrown away. I was so disappointed, but more than that, the young assessor had no idea that Clayton housed a Black community. That community enjoyed the trolley, known as 01 and 04, which ran to and fro in the middle of Clayton. And some of those mischievous boys that I told you about, maybe one or two girls, would take the connector pole from the electric line so that the conductor on that trolley would have to get off, now notice this word, off the street car, because that's what he called it there. He'd have to get off that street car and put that line back up so that the truck could go on its merry way. That community had a mom and pop grocery store, which was known as Mr. Cherry's. He had wonderful. And then in that grocery store back in that time, I see they had half loaves of bread at Sheets now for $1.39. When I was going to Jerry's store and needed a half loaf of bread, I could write off right in front of you because then it had a lumber yard and a cleaners that was called Midway Cleaners. And around 2007, a retired high school Clayton at a high school history teacher, whose name was Donna Rogers Beard. She and some Clayton Senior High School 4As. They were the African American Academic Achievers. That was a club. And they met with Mayor Ben Michelli, I think is the way you pronounce his name. And with $3,000, which was donated from the city of Clayton, towards a marker that was to be dedicated for Attic School, to state that this school for black students had been part of the Clayton School District for more than 30 years. And it existed on the southwest corner of Harlem and Untitled. Sadly, for whatever reason, the people who owned that parcel of land would not have the plaque placed on their grounds. It is placed about 4 parcels west of the corner where the school was erected in 1923. But anyway, something is there, a 12 by 12 plaque that you have to be looking for to find it. And it reads, on this site stood Alex, the school district of Clayton School for African American children, named for Christmas Alex, the first casualty of the Boston Massacre of 1770. The school served Clayton's African American children from kindergarten through 8th grade. The building was completed on February 23, 1923, and was used by the district until the Brown Board of Education, U.S. Supreme Court decision, integrated public schools in September of 1954. It says, dedicated the 17th day of May 2007, sponsored by the African American Academic Achievers of Clayton High School, City of Clayton, and Clayton School District. I want to thank the Clayton High School students that invited the ones of us that are still living at that time to meet at the Clayton High School in July of 2007 and board a school bus, something that I'd never ridden because I could walk to school. To the spot where the plaque was to be dedicated. And then they took us back to the school for refreshments. Parcels of land there now go for more than $560,000. Needless to say that the residents living there at that time could not have imagined that many cities. Like Richmond Heights, many people of high esteem resided in the Clayton community. Architects, teachers, a seamstress, and a postmaster. He was their first black postmaster. And I'd like to interject. He was Mr. Hutton. Marylynn Sims and her husband now live in the house where he resided. And they, along with the mayor and the city of Richmond Heights, made it possible for the Arthur Ashe Pocket Park. So that's very good. Thank you, Marylynn, for allowing the city to do that. Also, living joint in that community was a pool reporter, and I dare not forget him because he's the one that taught me trigonometry. And dare I say that when I got to school and got to the blackboard, I was a hip hooray on that. So anyway, not wanting ever to forget and giving much credit to that one-room schoolhouse for the warmth and the friendship shared, and the teachers that instilled in us to go far and accomplish much in becoming anything that we wanted to be. My nieces are here today, and I'd like to share that their grandfather, Mr. Willis, lived on Harlem Road in Caldwell, and he owned property, the front part of the property where the Carlton Ritz Hotel is now. Across the street on Hanley and Caldwell, there was Forest Cadillac Company at that time. So that property was purchased from some of the black people there. I just wanted to let you know that. This community was part of Clayton until the 1950s, coinciding with the Brown v. Board of Education decision in 1954. People started to buy up properties. And then the City Planning Commission of Clayton started talking about getting rid, that's a strong word, of this area and reserving it for commercial purposes in 1958. This community was slowly displaced throughout the 50s and 60s and was virtually non-existent by the 70s. Mr. John A. White Sr. wrote a book called The St. Louis Disappearing Black Community. Thank you, Wanda. That book houses a lot of information concerning the black communities of a lot of Richmond Heights, of Clayton, of Brentwood, I think in Vermont, and some of the others. There's a long-standing community, there was rather a long-standing community in Brentwood where the promenade is now. I lived in that area before moving to Brentwood. The ground on Highway 64, just before Long Road as you travel west, that now houses a mall on the north side of the highway, was once owned by the novel family, and they were cousins to the family that lived on Harlem Road, that the mayor, did you teach with Mr. Novel?
Yes.
With Mr. Novel, the mayor talked with Mr. Novel. Those people on that ground, the novel is dead. And if you travel on Church Road in Chesterfield, where the Fraser family owns 133 acres, about 33 members of the family still remain, and they're fighting to keep their land, and they use septic tanks and have no running water. But that entire acreage is surrounded by $1 million homes. The church and cemetery, however, in that black settlement are on the historical register list. Same goes for the Baptist Church in Maryland Heights. The community is no more, but they're protected by the historical register. The community of Robertson, Missouri is no more except for the First Baptist Church of Robertson on Woodland Avenue. Unless you know where you're going, it's hard to find. The airport said it needed that land for expansion. They didn't use it, but replaced it with industrial buildings. I bet you didn't know that black people lived in Chaminade at one time. Yeah, that's no more either. So hearing this history and passing it on to my grandchildren and your grandchildren is something of interest. That's why I keep every scrap of paper that my family says that I should give away.
Just another round of applause. Is there anyone here who has not heard of the speaking area? Does everyone here know that we had one right here in St. Louis, right here in Richmond Heights with us? And to tell us more about that is going to be the president of Richmond Heights Historical Society, Joellen McDonald, to talk to us about the life of Charles White.
Thank you for that introduction. Can everybody hear me? I can't project very well, so I gotta ask. The narrative, there's a short narrative on one of these posters over here that was taken from Charles White's obituary. And if you haven't had a chance to read it, it provides some information that I'm not going to review here. I'll give you some additional information. I was able to interview Mr. White 2 times in 2003, and it was a real privilege to talk to him. He was very generous with his stories and very generous with his photographs, and if he had not been, these photographs would not be on display today, so I'm very grateful to him for that. Charles White and his wife Mary were longtime residents of Richmond Heights. They purchased their house in 1965, and it was located at 7920 Bennett Avenue. Both of them were teachers in the St. Louis City public school system. Mr. White moved on to administration after 15 years of teaching. He also worked for the United States Post Office both before and after serving in World War II. He attended Stowe Teachers College, an all-black institution at that time, and enlisted in 1943 after having been deferred because he was the sole support of his family. He was discharged in November of 1946 when he returned to St. Louis and graduated from Stowe Teachers College. His story is representative of many other African American soldiers' stories during World War II. Segregation was universal in the United States, and it applied even to those who volunteered their time to serve this country. He told me that when he went to take the test down at the induction center in St. Louis, he was the only black man out of 150 others there to take the test. He and 49 men passed the test and then went on for their physical. He passed his physical, but unlike the others who were there, he was told to go home and wait until he was contacted. All the others who had passed both tests were inducted that day. About 3 weeks later, he received a notice in the mail that told him to report to Keesler Field in Biloxi, Mississippi. He was not sworn in until he got down there and had to take a train to get to Biloxi, and he was pretty nervous about riding on a train because he had heard many stories about how African Americans might be treated when they rode the train. The only thing that happened to him was that after he boarded one of the cars, he was told that he had to move to a car that was closer to the engine, but fortunately there was nothing else that happened in that trip to Biloxi. Once they were there, they were all tested again, and he remembered that there were a lot of physics questions. He said he scored 25th out of 125 men, and he attributed that to the fact that he had been an inveterate reader his whole life. So, good for him on that. All black pilots were trained at Tuskegee, which was a black college in Alabama. He did both his basic training and his flight certification there. Black pilots had begun training at Tuskegee in 1942. He became a second lieutenant when he completed his flight training, and part of that training also included 10 hours of flying a small airplane known as a P-40. The physical conditions of the airstrip at Tuskegee were not ideal, and in fact, several men died when they were trying to land their planes while they were in training. He belonged to the 332nd Fighter Group, which was an all-black pilots group that had been trained at Tuskegee, and they were assigned to Ramitelli Airfield, also a segregated facility in Italy, in September of 1944. They flew what were called P-51 Mustangs, sometimes referred to as red tails. These were small planes that escorted the large B-32 bombers over the mountains of the Balkan Peninsula, headed for the oil fields in Romania and other parts of the Balkan area. He told me with great pride that once the red tails were flying escort, no bomber was ever shot down. He flew 65 missions, and you'll see on the collage if you get a chance to read it, he was given many honors for his service and also for his heroism. When I was interviewing him, I told him my father was also stationed in Italy in 1944. He was sent there in February, and the plane, he was a navigator, not a pilot, but he flew a bomber, and they were shot down. And he was missing in action, presumed dead, for 6 weeks. Fortunately, because I would not be here to tell you the story, he survived and ended up having a large family, which was wonderful. But I told Mr. White, I said, I wish that you had been there earlier, because I don't think that my father's plane would have been shot down. So, thank you. There's a mural at our Terminal 1 at Lambert St. Louis International Airport. And if you have not seen it, I certainly want to call your attention to it. If you're leaving from the gates, especially the C gate, and you're walking to baggage claim, it's a 51-foot mural that honors, it's called Black Americans in Flight. Mr. White is pictured there, and he is number 35, so I would encourage you to look when you're there next. Charles White was a pilot, a decorated soldier, a husband and father, a teacher and administrator, a friend and neighbor. We honor his legacy today. These are photographs that he loaned me for copying. This is a picture of Charles White and his wife, Mary. These are obviously all World War II photos. This is his Mustang, and he named it and he painted it. So when you get up close, you'll be able to say it was called Kramer's Dream. And down here in 2007, there were 3 Tuskegee Airmen still living in St. Louis. And Jack Rice wrote a big article in the Post-Dispatch on them. And Charles is the man that's at the far right. These are examples of the Mustangs here. There's 3 of them flying in formation. This photo here, I found through the Library of Congress. It is a picture of these pilots getting their final orders at Ramitelli before they were going out to fly. And Mr. White's right there in the front, the one furthest left. This picture here too is his graduating class from Tuskegee. And he made it easy for all of us. It's marked with a star. And it says his name. So if you haven't gotten the chance to see these, please do. Thank you very much.
I'm going to introduce now a good friend who's going to introduce the next speaker in reflections growing up in our community. This is someone I've known basically all my life. I have to say, we just neighbors would be right across the street. I'd always wave. I have to tell you that I was much older than she is, and I have to say that she still would recognize me, an old man growing up. Marylynn Sims. Thank you.
Derwin is younger than I am. It's a pleasure to introduce to you 2 of my cousins who will be speaking next. Chavis Edward Ferguson Sr., who is a native of the Maplewood, Richmond Heights community. His family members were pioneers in the building of several buildings in the area, including the Berkeley Street home where he was raised, and now stands the Walmart store. Ed attended the Maplewood Richmond Heights School District and was one of the first African American students graduated from the senior high school. He received his Bachelor of Business degree from Webster University. Ed is well known throughout the St. Louis community for his work in the grocery industry as a store manager and as an urban relations coordinator. As a store manager, he employed many citizens in both the city and the county. He started working for Kroger part-time, and he was working for the U.S. Army Troop Support Command. He entered Kroger's management program after 10 years of federal service. With Kroger, he managed several stores and opened the first Kroger store, which was a supercenter at Lafayette and Jefferson Avenues in St. Louis. After he left Kroger, he joined Schnucks as a store manager, where he became the company's race relations liaison. Soon he was promoted to the office to serve as an urban administrator to improve race relations with the urban customers. In 1986, he implemented the Schnucks Excellence in Academic Program in partnership with the St. Louis Public Schools to improve student attendance and achievement. With both Kroger and Schnucks, he coordinated programs to help minority students and to help minority producers and vendors introduce their products to the St. Louis market, such as Glory Foods, Hard Sausage, Sylvia Greens, and Unlimited Water. He has always been active within the community. He served as chairperson for the Civilian Welfare Council, and he served as coordinator for the Annie Malone Day Parade and barbecue fundraiser. In addition, he worked with the Junior Achievement, United Negro College Fund Walks, En-ROADS, and others. He also served on the Normandy High School Advisory Council and the Labor Board for the City of Ferguson. Ed Ferguson received several recognitions, such as the United Way Service Award, the Schnucks Community Service Award, and the St. Louis Business Journal Most Influential Minority Business Leader Award. He is a member of one of our sister churches, the New Coast Brilliant Church of God in St. Louis, where he taught Sunday school classes for many years. He is married to his wife of 54 years, Audrey. They have 3 children and 7 grandchildren. And he doesn't have this on the paper, but I'd like to say that one son is an engineer, one is a physician, and their daughter is an attorney. So they've done very well. And I'll also introduce Audrey, his wife. Audrey Buford Ferguson is a retired 34-year St. Louis public school teacher. In 2003, she was selected to serve as the Teacher of the Year. In that capacity, she served on state committees representing public school teachers in Missouri and across the United States. She was the first public school teacher and the second African American teacher elected to serve as the Missouri Teacher of the Year. During that time, she had the opportunity to meet President Bush 3 times. The first time, she invited him to attend her school in St. Louis, and which was in January 2004. And the president held a live national broadcast from her school. Audrey asked to be a member of the 6-person panel with the president to discuss the No Child Left Behind program. In December 2004, she and her husband, Ed, were invited to the White House to attend a Christmas party. In addition to receiving the Teacher of the Year recognition, Audrey received numerous other awards, including the St. Louis American 2004 Stellar Award, the Harris Stowe Distinguished Alumni Award and the 2003 Distinguished Service of Education Award, as well as the Inroads Parent of the Year Award and the Apple for the Teacher Award. She has also received proclamations and resolutions from the Mayor of the City of St. Louis, the Missouri State House of Representatives, the Missouri Senate, and the U.S. House of Representatives. She was inducted to the Mid-America Education Hall of Fame in Kansas City in 2003, and she attended the International Teachers Space Camp and had the honor of carrying the 2004 Olympic torch. She is a product of the St. Louis Public School System. She attended and graduated from John Marshall Elementary and Charles Sumner High School. She received a degree in elementary education from Harris Stowe and received her master's in special education and remedial reading from Webster University. She started teaching at Stowe and also taught and became a Title I math teacher and taught remedial math for 28 years at the Blue Ribbon Gold Star Pierre Leclerc Elementary School. During her 34 years of service, she served as academic team leader, teacher in charge, instructional coordinator, state math rep, and successful schools coordinator. While at Leclerc, she and others wrote several proposals that brought funding for special programs that brought notoriety to her school. In addition to her many work-related activities, she had 2 educational articles published in professional journals. She retired in 2004, and since her retirement, she has worked as a math consultant, coach, and private tutor. Although she started and attended Wayman Temple AME Church, after marriage, she joined New Hope Brilliant Church of God, and where she served as Sunday school superintendent and as the health unit ministry. And now I'd like to introduce Ed and Audrey.
Good afternoon. After all of that, I don't have much to say. I was born and raised in Richmond Heights. I was born at the County Hospital on Brentwood Boulevard. And many of you know that is right. The County Hospital is, I believe, a nursing facility now. My parents and grandparents, they were pioneers in the Maplewood, Richmond Heights area. They built many of their homes, farmed the land, butchered their own food, meat, and they did a lot of things. I was educated at the Maplewood, Richmond Heights School, the Maplewood, Richmond Heights African American School. Right to my left, where the new hotel is, was a schoolhouse. It was a Lincoln school. It was K through kindergarten through 4th grade. And then I attended the Maplewood Richmond Heights African American School at the Thomas School on Thomas and Berkeley. So from there in 1958, I believe it was, I was allowed to go to the white junior high school on Sutton. Driving by there today, it's a playground. 25 of us African Americans were in the 5th and 6th grade that went to the junior high school. Only 7 of us graduated in 1963. So for one reason or another, they dropped out or got discouraged. From there we went on to I started, I'm sorry, many of the students, as was said earlier, the school that we attended, we couldn't go to the Maplewood Richmond Heights white school. We many of the students as far out as Festus, Missouri, had to take a bus, had to get train tickets to come to Douglas High School, or to go to Sumner, or to go to Vashon High School. Mr. Green was the principal at the time, and many in this room know who Mr. Green is. Mr. Green tried to get everything that he could for the African Americans that attended the Lincoln School. And one of the things that we couldn't do was during the summer program, we couldn't swim in the pool. So as early as 1962, we marched on the Maplewood swimming pool. And for those of you that don't know the difference between Maplewood and Richmond Heights, just go down the middle of Bruno, and that's the dividing line. Always say it's right in front of the Burton's house. But that's the dividing line. And that next year, we were allowed to swim in that pool. But other than that, Mr. Green used to take us to the YMCA, the boys, or the YWCA, the girls, to swim. When I was growing up, there was no Highway 64, wasn't there. Many of the homes that were in the way of Highway 64 was moved to the neighborhoods, and they would just cut a house off at the foundation and roll it down the street and put it on a lot that someone had bought. So that was real interesting. But there were no thoroughfares to go to downtown St. Louis. You would go down, if you didn't go down Manchester to downtown St. Louis, you would go down Oakland to Kings Highway to get to downtown St. Louis. Some of the businesses in the area that I remember right off are the Burke's gas station, which there's a gas station on the corner. It used to be a Shell station. Right next door to that was the Burke's home, and he also had a side business there. Also, next to that was the Mount Zion Church. Many of you know there was the handball court, the Mount Zion Church. There was the Foots had a small supermarket. There were Mr. Burke also had a grocery store, and his sister or sister-in-law ran that grocery store, Miss Joellen. There was, at the end of the street, Dale, there was United Lumber Company, and those were all woods. No one thought that you would see all the industry that's down there today. There were many others. There was the Corner Side Company, Willie Travis Side Company, the Gaskins. There were just many. The Taylors had a barbershop. The Johnsons had a barbershop. We just had a lot of smart people in Maplewood, Richmond Heights. And I'm not going to prolong it much longer. I'll let my wife come up and give her reflections.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Ed and I have been married so long. I've watched the community change As I was raised in the city of St. Louis, went to an all-black school, all-black high school, so I did not have the experiences that it had as a child. My first experience really, well, of course, we went shopping, we couldn't sit down at the counter at Woolworths, but other than that, we didn't have much of a problem until, well, when I was a senior in high school, I got a job at the Bank of St. Louis downtown, and still did not run into much. When I met Ed, I was 16, and when he brought me out to meet his family, my first reaction to Maplewood was, this is the country. I didn't see a town. As he said, his grandparents were farmers, and it was kind of a shock to me. But after we married, I'll tell you, I'll share this with you, I won't take a lot of time. We moved to U City. University City was fine, we were in an integrated neighborhood. After our third child was born, we moved to the city of Ferguson. And that is where we ran into racial discrimination. The things that you heard about Ferguson, we lived there 20 years. True. Our children were harassed, we were harassed, to the point where I had to call the FBI. They threatened to harm our children, and it was shocking to us because this was in 1970, when was the baby born? 8. Can you imagine in 1978 that people were putting crosses and putting hangman's nooses in trees and threatening to drown your children? So we have been through a lot. We have experienced a lot. When Ed shared the stories of how his brothers and sisters had to catch buses to go to school and things. So we have been through decades of Black history. So I thank you for inviting us, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that. I went to school here, as I said earlier, back in the 60s and 70s, and saw a lot that was going on. And we had our problems during integration overall. But I have to say that I think this is a community where it did work. And a lot has changed since I went to school here in the 70s. And to kind of bring us up to speed now, I'd like to introduce us, to catch us up, I'd like to introduce us to the superintendent of the Maplewood Richmond Heights School District, Dr. Karen Hall.
Good afternoon, everyone. My remarks will be brief, but I initially want to say I feel so honored to be a part of this celebration. And I'm feeling a little emotional right now, hearing all the history and the legacy here. I first want to start talking about my background. I am from this region, not here in Richmond Heights, but I'm from a historically Black community here, Northwestern. And my family came from Northwestern since 1915. And I came from a family of educators, and one in particular, one of my aunties was the first graduating class of Douglas High School. So when I hear all of these stories about historically Black communities here in the St. Louis region, there's such a great sense of pride and responsibility that I have in what my role is as an educator. I've been blessed to lead and be a part of the Maplewood Richmond Heights for 12 years now, and I've been superintendent for 8 years. And knowing my own particular history and learning more about the history of the community that I lead, I am so determined to do the work that needs to be done right now. Education, and you all know, things are challenging right now in our country. In our recent history, we've been faced with some things that students really, I didn't have to face. Technology, students are faced to see things right now that right away you wouldn't think they would have to deal with. So it is really determination and grit to ensure that we are creating students that have this sense of critical consciousness and understanding of equity and social justice. And that has been my platform and what I'm determined to ensure that is embedded in all of our experiences here for our students at MRH. And we have difficult conversations with one another because we have to. We can't pretend that racism doesn't exist. And then how do we help young people talk about these things and address these things? How do I work with staff to ensure that we have a rigorous curriculum that is responsive and inclusive so all children can thrive? And that is the platform. That is what we are working hard day in and day out to make sure that that happens for all young people. You know, the MRH over time has become a winning district in many areas, in music, in the arts, in academics. We have done quite a bit. And I hope everyone is proud of the fact, because it has taken this community together to make this happen. But again, that sense of community has always been there, and I want to ensure that it's nurtured, but it's inclusive and representative of everyone. I am proud to now say that just maybe a month or two ago, the Board of Education approved a course in our middle school grades to actually embed the history of both of our communities here. Yeah, it's a big deal. We've had projects here and there, but now this is a grade-bearing course that talks about the history of Richmond Heights and Maplewood. Yeah. So then I say thank you so much for doing these things, because this inspires me, encourages me personally, but also professionally to be, consistent and constant about putting this forward. I'm just thinking, looking at this right here, I know when I first started as the superintendent, I was exposing my staff to the historical spaces in St. Louis. And so when it's out and people know, we will make this happen. So thank you for doing this. This is fantastic. And again, Maplewood Richmond Heights can and will remain a space in St. Louis County that will be leaders in ensuring that we have educational equity and excellence for all kids. Thank you very much.
Now we have a musical treat. Joining us again will be Reverend Williams and they're talking, I don't want to interrupt. And one of many great voices that have come out of our community. Kathy, our city Caldwell.
As she's coming, let me say that this is my classmate. We graduated the bicentennial class of 1976.